we're here to talk about what is at times a troubling relation, right? Which is some euphemism I gave for the Jaimini GK. Now, like every Jaimini Karaka, as you read about in the article, every Jaimini Karaka encompasses a lot of variety of different meanings. With regards to the GK, I was showing all the variety of meanings it could relate to as it pertains to sixth house significations. But of course, one of those is illness, disease, accidents, injuries. And it's, as I mentioned, it's in this capacity that I've, utilized and researched the GK the most, but, we're going to touch on those other potential meanings as well. As you look at this chart, what immediately strikes you?
GK in the Lagna.
GK is in the Lagna, ascendant.
GK in the
Lagna, Lagna Lord is in 11th. Retro Lagna Lord.
Well, hold on, just, this. So let's focus with what people mentioned. And of course, this GK is a natural malefic. And, it rules the ninth, but it also rules what?
The
8th house.
house.
And who can tell me where the Chara dasha would start? Jaimini's Chara dasha is calculated by K and Ra. Where would that begin?
It will begin from Lagna.
Gemini.
It will begin from Gemini. And what would be the first sub-period within the Gemini major period? Anybody?
Taurus.
No. Taurus. What do we notice about Taurus?
Rahu.
And?
Aspected by
The Lord of the Venus.
Hold on. Just what do we notice about the influence on Taurus?
Yeah.
12th house. 12th
Rahu
house.
Ketu axis.
Rahu in the 12th. Rahu Ketu axis in the 12th, 6-12 axis.
Well, in Jaimini, it's sign-based aspects. So what I want people to see is it has Rahu in the influence of Mars from Capricorn. Remember, we're doing Jaimini, so we're doing Rashi Dristi.
Yes.
But also the aspect of the natural benefic Jupiter strong in its own sign, right? Or it's actually in its exaltation sign. Now, I'm going to share with you that this is the birth chart of a child that was born. So in other words, at birth, this person runs Gemini Taurus, which then should indicate what to us immediately?
Health issues.
112, Rahu in the 12th. So some kind of hospitalization.
Well,
Did the father get a chance to go abroad? Because Rahu is also the co-lord of the 9th house.
Well, yes. Now, what I want people to focus on is the major period is Gemini, right? So what happens with Gemini? What are the influences on it? The primary influence on it is Saturn, a natural malefic, who's also the 8th lord. And it's the GK in the Lagna. So, of course, this is quite an affliction to the Lagna. On a more subtle level, whose nakshatra is Saturn in?
Rahu.
Mars.
Mars is nakshatra.
Mars.
What kind of planet is Mars for this Lagna?
Malefic.
Malefic. 6th and 11th lord. Malefic.
And where does it go?
8th exalted.
And what influences does it get by Rashi Dristi?
It's all sun, not sun, sorry. It gets
Rahu. Mars,
Rahu and Ketu.
Rahu Ketu. Now let me give you the information that in the Vimsotri dasha, this child was born in the moon major period.
In what?
The moon major period.
Moon in Hasta.
Yes, the moon's in Hasta. So because the moon's in Hasta, they were born in the moon major period.
But it's a second lord, so it's again one of them.
It's a Marika's second lord. And who is it Kendra Sambandha to?
Saturn GK. It is the MK having aspect of Saturn G.
So slow down, slow down. We're doing Parashari. When we're doing Parashari, we're not looking at Jaimini Karakas, please.
Oh, okay.
Only when we're doing Jaimini are we looking at Karakas. We're not mixing the two.
Sure, sure, sure.
So born in the moon major period, and what if I told you the sub-period was Saturn? Moon Saturn in Vimshotri and Gemini Taurus in Chara.
It is also getting a Vimshotri aspect from Rahu on the 4th house, right?
Well, if you take the aspects of Rahu and Ketu, I know many do, and I'm not disputing that it might be valid. I was not taught by K and Rao to do that, and that's not my approach, but yes, you could say that.
The moon being a second lord would act as a maraka in some cases. So moon dasha.
Yes, of course, it's a primary maraka. So moon Saturn in Vimshotri and Gemini Taurus, seeing the confluence between the two, what would you think about what's happening at birth?
Difficult birth, problem at the time of birth, affliction to mother.
There's danger to the health at birth. Does everyone see that? Does everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
This child, this is a chart of a child who died just a few hours after childbirth
Oh, wow.
in these periods and subperiods. Now, yeah, I'm not saying that I could have predicted that this child would die. And this is more of a question, as you've all heard me say, of ayus. And I don't claim to have any ability to consistently and accurately calculate ayus. But I would hope by applying the principles that you've learned in this program, both in Parashari periods and now Jaimini periods, that you would see that there's the danger here right at birth, right? The most obvious being indicated by a natural malefic who's the 8th lord being the GK in the Lagna and starting the period of Gemini at birth. There was a question?
Mark, I have a quick question regarding the placement of GK in the nakshatra of Mars. So from the Gemini perspective as well, you consider the placement of the planet in the nakshatra and how that nakshatra ruler is placed. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Okay, thanks.
You know, that's a more second level evaluation of a planet. You know, the first level is, you know, what house is it placed in? What houses does it rule? What Jaimini Karaka is? What associations does it have? But yes, I would look at the nakshatra lord and what's happening with that. And I think it's quite relevant here when you see what, you know, its nakshatra lord is Mars, the 6th lord and the 8th.
And the 11th lord is in the 8th as well, which is where Mercury is. So Lord of the 1st is in the 11th, and the 11th lord is Mars in the 8th.
Well, what's more relevant? Yeah, this is all true. I know Mars's aspect as a 6th lord onto the Lagna lord is an additional affliction to the Lagna. So in other words, Lagna gets the influence of Saturn, but the Lagna lord also gets the influence of Mars, one of whom is the 8th lord, one of whom is the 6th lord.
I think, Mark, from Rashi, it's a little hard because Saturn being also the 9th lord, you know, in the Lagna, you know, but from the moon, I'm seeing if you make moon as a Lagna, then the Lagna lord, Mercury goes in the 8th, aspected by Mars. That is making some sense also from there.
No, of course, you know, as you know, in the Parashari system, we always want to see the patterning from the moon, in which case, you know, the subperiod that they're born in was Saturn, who becomes the 6th lord. And as you noted here, the Lagna lord from the moon goes to the 8th, with the 12th lord aspected by Mars as an 8th lord and the Maraka's 2nd lord. So if you're saying, does this add some color to why the moon Saturn period could bring this event, my answer would be yes.
Mark, just a point of clarification and maybe the kind of rule setting that you'd like to do is, uh, what do you want to, I mean, what do we want to talk, what do we say about Rashi? So Rashi is what, moon or is it ascendant? How do you want to, how do you classify that?
No, you got the
Between,
Rashi, you got the Rashi chart, and a Rashi chart has a birth lagna, it has a Chandra lagna.
yeah. So in terms of terminology, how do we differentiate the two for this discussion?
Well, we call one the birth lagna and the other Chandra lagna.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Thanks.
I have a quick question. Here, as eighth Lord Saturn is aspecting also the Venus, Mercury, and AK Sun, does that increases the chance of that baby he got that illness, or it could have been modified if AK Sun was not there, or yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you walk through that again?
Yeah.
What are you asking?
So my question is, Saturn is aspecting Sun, Mercury, and Venus.
Hold on. It's not aspecting. Saturn aspects 3 signs from itself, which would be Leo, and then 10 signs from itself, which would be Pisces.
Shruti, Mars is aspecting.
Mars is aspecting
Yeah,
these
Mars,
planets
1,
and
2,
rays,
3.
not Saturn.
Okay,
So
yeah. So
you want to check that.
yeah.
Mark, I just want to make a comment about this, please. Someone had mentioned that I believe what they were alluding to was that right at the onset, they said that the severity of the disease, of the illness, does not seem very prominent. But I actually take a contrary view to that, because number one, there are no benefics in the Kendra. Number one. Number two, you have the eighth Lord Saturn in the Lagna. The Lagna Lord is retrograde. And then you have the Lagna Lord aspected by a very exalted Mars. This is a full-blown affliction.
No, you're absolutely right, as usual. You're seeing it absolutely correctly.
And who, Rohit? Mars being the 6th Lord, by the way.
Exactly. I mean, for this Lagna, Mars and Saturn are the 2 worst planets that you can have.
Let me just make a point here for more beginning students, because I run into this all the time. Somehow students get the impression that when a planet's exalted, like a natural malefic, Mars or Saturn, and even if it has a good lordship, that somehow then it doesn't afflict. Nothing could be further from the truth. So please always bear this in mind. Okay, so is there any more questions about this before we move on? We have a lot of charts.
Mark, one question. Was there any problem to the mother also during the birth?
I don't know. The only thing I know about this case is that the child died within hours after birth. Okay. So I'm not going to be able to.
Mark, can I say something?
Of course, Mina Mom.
The GK Saturn is the degree wise, it's very close to the ascendant degree.
Yes. Yes, and that is a relevant issue. I mean, obviously, the closer, it's a very close affliction to the Lagna. Right?
Exactly.
Both as the natural malefic 8th Lord, but also as the GK.
GK.
And I was just reading in your Essentials on Jaimini course, the DK can act as a Marika in Jaimini as well. So it's conjunct the Lord of the Ascendant. Would that count as an additional Marika?
Well, it can, but it's not really activated in this dasha sequence. Actually, only by lordship. Remember, it was the Taurus subperiod, 12th house from the Lagna, and with these afflictions. Although also with that aspect of Jupiter, didn't save it. All right, we're going to move on because there's a lot of different charts that I want to discuss here. And for those who just were in my medical astrology webinar, I use this case, and so as we discuss it here and I ask questions about it, please remain hang back, please. So this person, I'm just going to discuss it from the Jaimini point of view. This person is currently running their Scorpio Aries period, And you know what I should have shown here is something I'm showing in the charts in medical astrology, and most of you should probably be aware of this, but there's two upagrahas referred to as sons of Saturn and having Saturn's nature that are Mandi and Gulika. And in this case, if I was showing it, bear in mind that Mandi and Gulika are in Scorpio. So this person's running their Scorpio Aries period. So what would you say about this and why?
So Mark, Scorpio, the sign of Scorpio is aspected by GK, a retrograde GK.
You were in the medical astrology course, so I asked you to hang back, all right? You've seen this example, right? Could I?
Sorry, Mark. Yes, sorry.
No problem. Could someone else who was not in the medical astrology class, could you comment?
Yeah, Mark, both Scorpio and Aries are aspected. So like you said, Gulika and Mandi is in Scorpio. So they aspect Aries. Aries is got the GK and it's aspecting onto Scorpio. So, and they're what? In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 6-8 relationship.
Good, you're seeing it. So first of all, what makes Scorpio eligible to potentially bring health problems is the fact that it contains a Gulika and Mandi, right? Secondly, it gets the aspect of the planets in Aries, one of whom is the GK, the other who's also the natural malefic Mars. Then they're now, that's the major period, and then they're now running the sub-period of Aries that contains a natural malefic and the GK itself, and it falls in the 6-8 relationship, that is from Scorpio, Aries is the 6th. So once again, not just because of the influence of the GK, but because the GK is a part of the picture, and there are other factors that show the potential for a major health problem during this time, this is evident. Now, what if I told you that the person was running Ketu Rahu in Vimshotri? What confluence would you see as a result of that?
Well, it's Keto's in the 6, and the Lord of the 6 is in with the GK and in Aries.
Well, again, we're doing Parashari, but what you said is very relevant. First of all, Ketu is in the 6th, house of disease, giving the results of the sun, who has some malefic influence, right? But what about sun's position that makes it dangerous?
One is
Marka
the second
house?
house with the second lord and the 7th lord.
Right. It's in the Marka second house with 2 other primary Markas. What's the good thing about it, though? What helps offset the
benefic hemming?
Yes, the very benefic hemming on both sides. But K2 is in the 6th, giving the results of the sun, who's in the Marka house with 2 other Markas with affliction, but gets rescued to some degree by this hemming. Right? And then the sub-period is Rahu. What would you have to say about that?
Rahu is in the 12th with the 5th lord.
It's
the results of Saturn.
it being with, go ahead, someone. What were they saying about giving results of Saturn?
It's in the Saturn sign, Mark, so it will give result of Saturn.
And why might that be a problem from the standpoint of health?
And Saturn is in Marka.
Let him finish. Go ahead, Vikas. I ask you, why would that be a problem for the health?
So Mark, because Saturn is again in the 7th house, which is again the Marka 2nd and 7th, both got activated.
Why else?
It's a 12th lord, and
why else?
Retrograde.
Thank you.
Why else? Do you see that it's afflicting the Lagna and the Lagna Lord?
Yeah.
Yes.
7th aspect, yeah.
Yep.
And you know, this Lagna Lord has a beautiful Swakshetra Jupiter as the Lagna Lord in the Lagna, but besides getting this aspect of Saturn, what other problem is there here?
Hemming.
Yes, there's malefic hemming. So this person is running Scorpio Aries in Chara and Ketu Rahu. And from what we've walked through here in our analysis, everyone should see that it confluently shows a period, a time period that there could be a major health issue. Sorry to say that this is a chart of a very dear friend of mine that I've known since I was 6 years old, who has just been diagnosed with renal carcinoma. He has a rather large tumor growing in his right kidney, and you'll have the kidney removed in an operation on February 12th. Now, those people not in my medical astrology class, do you have any idea which graha and which house is said to pertain to the kidney? Say according to
Seventh house, and Saturn being the chronic, showing the chronic illnesses.
Well, there's maybe some different references in different texts, but Charak in his excellent book, The Essential Astrology,
Venus
gives
is
the
the planet
sixth.
for kidney.
Go ahead, Rohit. Sorry, you were saying.
Venus is the planet for kidney.
And what is the house?
I think it's sixth house.
Correct. And what are we seeing here? K2 in the sixth house, and the sun we talked about has the rule of the sixth has some affliction, and it's what's being activated in the dasha sequence. Now, whose nakshatra is K2 in?
In Venus's nakshatra.
Venus is nakshatra. Now this
Eighth
Venus.
Lord.
Now this Venus does not. Yes, eighth Lord. This Venus does not appear to be afflicted, but remember that Mandi and Gulika are over in Scorpio. And those who study with me know that I pay a lot of attention to Kendra Sambandha, particularly if it's close in degrees. What's going on here with this Venus by Kendra Sambandha?
Oh, it's aspecting the moon Rahu Ketu axis on the sixth house.
Well, it's not, there's not an aspect, but it's very, look at the Rahu Ketu axis, 24 degrees. Look at Venus, 24 degrees. This is an exact Kendra Sambandha. And recall that this is happening in Ketu Rahu. Do you see?
Was it a mysterious, did it take a long time for them to find the problem with K2 being there?
Well, apparently the tumor has been growing for about 3 years, and it was only recently discovered. So, but I don't think it was misdiagnostically. Once they did a CAT scan or whatever they do to sort of detect these things, it was visible. So, whether there was diagnostic confusion or not, which K2 can oftentimes bring, I wouldn't necessarily say that was true in this case. Although,
but was he having symptoms for long?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Apparently not. So, this is again like a recent discovery, although the surgeon had the opinion that this has probably been growing about a centimeter, once a year for a period of about 3 years.
Yeah. Renal cell carcinomas tend to get detected a little late because they don't usually have symptoms.
Right. And you're hearing from someone who's a surgeon, folks. So he would know about these things. Right? He would know about these things. All right.
And Mark,
hopefully there's going to be a good outcome here. Now, this is one of the things I wanted to discuss. He's now in Ketu Rahu. I believe it's in March. I'd have to check that. He's going to be moving into Ketu Jupiter. Would you expect that sub-period to be better for health, worse, the same?
Better.
What would you think about that, and why?
Jupiter in the Lagna, I think.
Yeah, better.
It might be little. See, it's Jupiter in the Lagna it's not retrograde, it's a benefic, so it will help. But again, Jupiter is going 8th from Ketu, so I think there will be some crisis. But overall, I think Jupiter in the Lagna should help. And Ketu again in the Rashi is in the sign of sun, which is also exalted. So sun, exalted sun will also help.
Well, I think it's more the benefic hemming of the exalted sun here that is the main helpful factor. Anyone want to take any other view?
Well, it has Saturn hitting on it, looking right at it. So look at Saturn.
Yeah, I'm concerned that both the Lagna and the Lagna Lord here gets this close aspect of Saturn as the 12th Lord, while at the same time, the Lagna and Lagna Lord are both hemmed, right? But,
and Jupiter is followed by a Saturn period, so maybe the Jupiter period could show a bit of reprise, but maybe the following sub-period of Saturn might show a bit of a, I don't know, a risk.
K2 Saturn is worrisome. It's all worrisome for me because this is someone very close to me who I love. But, you know, it is what it is. Mostly, again, I wanted to, you know, it's the role of the GK here. Before the first chart, it was in the sign containing the GK as a major period. This is a sign, Scorpio, getting the aspect of the GK, but then the crisis comes in the sub-period of this sub-period sign containing the GK. But there's more to it than that, obviously, too.
I have actually one last question here. Sorry. Saturn gets directional strength here from the 7th house, and the Jupiter also gets the directional strength. So how it's going to be exactly, who gets, like, will he be, you know, getting benefits of Jupiter or malefic strong effects of Saturn?
Well, you know, remember, strength is not influence. Strength indicates how strongly a planet gives the results, whatever those results are. So Saturn aspecting strongly as a retrograde malefic onto the Lagna Lord, that's its influence and not a favorable one. On the other hand, Jupiter as a strong natural benefic aspecting onto the 7th house and to Saturn, the 11th and the 12th Lord here. Now, what kind of combination is the 1st Lord in a mutual aspect with the 11th Lord strong in angles? What kind of combination is that?
It's a Dhan Yoga.
Right.
But
So,
Mars,
you know,
Jupiter is in the nakshatra of Saturn. And
yes.
Saturn aspected by a retro Saturn. So there are more negatives than positive. Seems like.
Well, you have to do that kind of general ledger, pluses and minuses sort of thing, and you can make the case. But she asked me about the strength here of both Jupiter and Saturn. That's the question I was responding to. Again,
from a health point of
strength. Sometimes students get the impression just because a planet's strong, it means its results it gives are always favorable. That's just not the case. Strength is strength. How strongly a planet gives results, the kind of results it gives depends on other matters. Another question.
From a health point of view, Mark, this Saturn is actually it's actually a bad planet. It rules the 12th. It's the Lord of the 12th and the 11th. 11th is not a good what do you call house for health reasons. Saturn is in a Marka house. It is retrograde, so the strength of Saturn is actually a very negative thing in this case from a health point of view.
This is the point I was trying to make. I think you actually stated it better than I. Saturn is not, it's a functional malefic for this Lagna. It's particularly the 12th Lord connected to both the Lagna Lord. It's in the Marka 7th. It's retrograde, as you said, and it gives its influence strongly in a negative way. Doesn't mean it can't give good results and strong results in terms of the Dhan Yoga results it can give, and it has.
And I just noticed that from Chandra Lagna, Jupiter is the 2nd Lord in the 2nd house as well. So yeah, the Jupiter period is not necessarily as good as it could be either.
You have to see, people sometimes get enamored with just seeing a planet in its own sign, particularly a benefic, but what kind of results that benefic will give has so much to do with what else is going on with it.
Yeah, the positive could be Mark 8th Lord in the 8th from Ketu in increasing longevity, and then Jupiter in the 1st having directional.
That's a temporary thing. That's a temporary thing, right?
Yeah.
Strong 8th Lord from the Lagna, which can increase longevity, I wouldn't really bring that into effect here.
Mark, I know you've said that the dasha periods are always primary, but I think that Jupiter will be transiting into Aquarius while he's in his Jupiter sub-period into the 12th house. Would that also be a consideration?
You know, it would, if you, particularly if he's running the Jupiter major period, which he's not. Somebody needs to mute their mic. Please mute your mic if you've got background noise. Thank you. But you know, what other major transit is going on here?
Saturn is looking at the Lagna. Saturn is aspecting the Lagna currently.
And what else? And what else? What other major Saturnian transit is going on here? Do people see he's in the Sadi Sati?
Sade Sati, yeah.
Yes. Correct.
In the first phase of it. Going now to this chart, this person is, you know, I think I would consider them very old, but they're, you know, more on the later side. And they're running their major period of Leo. While at the same time, they're running the Saturn major period. Now, in Jaradasha, well, what's potentially problematic about Leo based on what we're discussing here?
GK, there.
GK Mars.
Mars GK, a malefic.
And then who additionally aspects?
Saturn.
Right.
Jupiter.
Exalted Saturn.
Sorry, not Jupiter, only Saturn.
Exalted Saturn, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, look at Saturn's degrees. Can somebody place it in Navamsha?
Debilitated.
Goes into Aries in Navamsha, so this Saturn is not quite the, you know, exalted planet that it appears on the surface. But coming back to the Leo major period, what is the Karakamsha Lagna here? The Venus at 29 Cancer is the
Pisces.
So it becomes Pisces, right?
Yes.
So Leo is the second house from the birth Lagna, but what house is it from?
Sixth.
The sixth house. So it contains the GK, right? And there's additional malefic influence. And look at the degrees between Mars and the Sun.
Planetary, yeah. Combustion, yeah. 1 degree.
Now, which sub-period within the Leo major period might you identify as being a particularly dangerous one, or one that could precipitate a health crisis?
Both Cancer and Libra. Cancer because Atma Karaka goes 12th from there, and Libra because from Karkamsha, Saturn goes into 8th.
Good. So one of the things, again, that makes Leo somewhat dangerous for health is not just the fact that it contains the GK, but from there, Amakaraka, Venus goes to the 12th, but it's also, of course, under the influence of Jupiter. Jupiter is again in its exaltation sign, but look at its degrees. What you notice about that?
It goes into Capricorn.
Right. So these two exalted planets here, Jupiter and Saturn, are not as strong as they would appear, because being in their exaltation signs in the birth chart, they go into their debilitation signs in the Vamsh. Now you'd have to see if then, we're not showing the Vamsh here, you'd have to see if there's a cancellation, which, you know, then would, you know, that would factor in as well, but not getting into that here. But you correctly identified, congratulations, that Libra would be a sub-period within the major period of Leo that could precipitate a health crisis. Of course, what are the influences on Libra?
Team Mars, Sun, Mercury.
It's the natural malefic Saturn, and gets the aspect of all the grahas from Leo, all of whom has to be considered natural malefics, one of whom is the GK. Now, here's a more subtle point. when I was first learning Jaimini, it was a question in my mind whether you would take the house lordship of planets when they're in a sign and whether that becomes relevant. And I was uncertain about this until I came across a close reading of some K.N. Rao's case studies. And I saw that he was doing this. And I've since then, started paying attention to this. And I believe it's valid, in which case Libra contains who in terms of a lord?
Eighth lord.
Eighth and seventh.
Eighth lord.
Marker.
Right. So, and then Saturn, remember, was the major period. So this is actually the chart of someone in this program. They were kind enough to provide this. They made a comment here that this period that we're talking about, Leo Libra, caused kidney problems that resulted in hospitalizations, 2 surgeries, and 2 lesser level outpatient procedures. I'm not exactly sure what the subperiod was in the major period of Saturn. It might have been K2, it might have been Mercury, it might have been K2, I'm not certain which. Either one could give this. Now, the kidneys we just talked about as being related to what, Graha?
Yes, Venus.
Venus. And does Venus have any affliction here?
Yes, Saturn.
Saturn's 10th aspect.
Saturn, does the 6th house have any affliction?
Saturn again.
6th lord Rahu. 6th house Rahu.
Rahu Ketu axis.
Right, it has the affliction of the Rahu Ketu axis in the aspect of Saturn. Again, we're doing Parashara here because we're looking at the timing as to why Saturn K2 or Saturn Mercury may have brought this. Right?
Saturn aspects both the Lord and the house.
Right, that's what I wanted people to see. And it aspects it as a Mark, a 7th lord, and as an 8th lord. Right?
Leo Sagittarius is also problematic, Mark.
Could be. Could be.
Mark, again, from if you look from the dasha lagna, Saturn also not only aspecting Jupiter lagna, but also from the dasha lagna, it aspecting the 6th lord and the 6th lord and the 6th house. 6th lord, and which
Correct.
Jupiter again goes.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
And not only Saturn, Mars is also aspecting the 6th from there. See, that's the one more point.
It does. It does. This could add, additional confluence. So, when you were doing, if you were just doing a health assessment, just in terms of sound or unsound health, and for this particular chart, what would you make note of, either on the plus side or the unfavorable side?
Saturn in
Lord.
Yeah, why don't Shruti go ahead.
Yeah, 8th Lord Venus is GK also sitting in the ascendant. So that might be a major bad effect on health.
Yeah, so, Venus for this ascendant, when it's exalted in the Lagna, is quite paradoxical, right? Because, again, it's one of these, what I call malignant 8th lords, meaning that its other lordship is not good, and therefore it becomes the worst functional malefic for this Lagna. And of course, it's a natural benefic, and it's an exaltation sign, but it's also rather closely conjunct the ascendant. And then, if that were the end of the story, that'd be one thing, but what else is going on here in terms of influences on the Lagna?
So Saturn, Rahu, Ketu axis,
Right. And again, Saturn is not a good planet for this Lagna either. It's the 12th lord. Now, here's an interesting point, and I actually was talking about this in the previous class. We all know that when the Lagna Lord is in the Lagna, or when the Lagna Lord aspects the Lagna, this is supposed to be a very good thing for the Lagna, and therefore potentially protective of the health, particularly if it's a natural benefic, or even but if it's a natural malefic. And we see this here with this Jupiter, but what's the problem here with this Jupiter?
Jupiter's retrograde, and it also doesn't have directional strength. It's in the opposite place of its directional strength.
Also, what I'm referring to is that it's retrograde. Again, Charak in his excellent book, The Essentials of Astrology, makes the point that a Lagna Lord in or aspecting its own Lagna, if it's retrograde, whether it's a natural benefic or it's a natural malefic, will not protect as it might otherwise. And this actually, based on this person's life experience, seems to be the case here. So, so you've got some problems. Now, from the Jaimini point of view, you've got the GK and the Lagna, like the first chart we looked at, but what else would you make note of here from the Jaimini point of view? What in the Jaimini system represents the body, represents like the first house?
Lagna.
Aries.
AK.
Atma Karaka.
Yeah. Atma.
It's the AK, right? So it's not just the GK in the Lagna, and actually the GK is in a mutual glance with the Lagna Lord by Rashi Dristi, but it's the fact that the AK, the Jaimini factor related to the body, is also with the GK, and not just that, but with the Rahu Ketu axis. Right? So this chart was actually provided to me by someone in the class. It's not their chart, but they'd shared that this person has had 2 heart attacks. One took place at the age of 41. This was back in October of 2010. The period in Shota was Ketu Saturn, right? And of course, these are part of the afflictions for both the Lagna and the Lagna Lord. But in Jaimini, it was, and this is what I wanted people to see, it happened in Leo Libra. First of all, which sign of the birth chart is Leo?
6th house.
6th and 8th.
It's 6th house, right? And influences on it that could be make it problematic. Influences on Leo that could make it problematic from health standpoint, being the 6th house.
Mars is aspecting
Mars
by Jaimini.
And Mars is aspecting, right? And then come to the sub period of Pisces.
Saturn there's Rahu there.
Well, that's where that conjunction of the GK and Saturn is.
Yep.
Does this person have any like blood sugar issues as well, or just the heart issues?
I know nothing about their medical background except what I've told you. Now, the timing for the second heart attack which was apparently much more mild. It did require hospitalization, and they had the stenting procedure done. The major period was Venus Rahu. And this illustrates how such a Venus as this, even though it's exalted, can, for anyone with Pisces in the Lagna here, particularly if additional affliction, can be problematic. And they're together, Venus Rahu, giving that result. And it was Virgo Pisces in Jara. Again, activating the afflictions to the Lagna Lord and the Lagna itself, and then the GK-AK combination. So when you see sort of confluence like this, if you were to saw this person coming up to their Venus Rahu period that coincided with their Virgo Pisces period, the danger to the health is quite clear, is it not? Questions about this example?
The heart issue could come out, I feel, because of the sign of Leo, just in terms of significance, maybe.
Well, yes, it's more complicated than that. One of the things, and we're going to be covering this in the medical astrology course, but Charak gives a set of parameters in his book, The Essentials of Astrology, for evaluating, the potential for heart problems. And one of the things he talks about, of course, the sun is a significator, but the fifth house, fifth lord from the sun, as being something that needs to be evaluated. And then when you run those, associated periods. So who's the fifth lord from the sun here?
Venus.
Venus. Oh, wow.
Venus,
Okay.
with all the affliction. And remember, the first one came in K2 Saturn, which would have activated that structure, and the second one in Venus Rahu, which activated that structure. What other afflictions are there to the fifth house from the sun? In other words, Taurus. By
Mars and Saturn.
Both Mars and Saturn. Does everyone see that? Mars is 8th house aspect, Saturn is 3rd house aspect onto Taurus. So both the fifth lord and the fifth house from Karaka's sun, and it gets the aspect of Jupiter too, but it's retrograde. And according to the principles that K. Rao teaches and that I teach, that would not protect.
There's just a lot of inherent weakness in the chart from a health point of view, Mark. I mean, just the fact that the Lagna is in the starting degrees of a sign, and then you have Rahu, which is always retrogrades, Saturn, which is a bad planet for this one, Jupiter, the Lagna Lord retrograde, Ketu. I mean, the only saving grace is that they are in a Kendra, but apart from that, there's no relief in this chart.
No, it clearly shows the potential for unsound health in certain areas and at certain times.
Yeah.
This man is not that old. I think he's in his early 50s now. Remember, he had his first heart attack at 41, and now a second one, milder, although, here at age 50. And so, that's a big issue.
I have a quick question. Do we have any idea about, if this person has suffered any renal problems or, like kidney related problems?
The sum total of what I know about this person is what I've said.
Okay, sir.
I understand people's curiosity about that, but I'm just not always going to be able to answer your question. Now, again, I discussed this chart earlier in the medical astrology course, so for those who have seen this example, please hang back. Now, I talked about some positive meaning that a combination of the AMK and the GK could have in some charts. Does anybody remember anything about this?
Serena Williams,
success in competition.
Sports people, Serena Williams, and I guess you suggested that those charts. Yeah.
Yes, you remember that. So this person at a fairly young age, and he's still a young person, he's only in his late teens, 19 years old, ran their Virgo major period. And of course, it's the 10th house of the horoscope. It contains a natural benefic who is the 10th lord in the 10th house. And of course, it is the AMK, right? So what could this mean?
Achievements.
Yes, it could be a time where you'd have some significant success, some significant achievement. Now, there's a lot of different influences on it. It does get the influence of the benefic, natural benefic Jupiter, but also the Rahu Ketu axis, and of course, Mars, planet of sports competitions, but also in this case, the GK. This is the chart of a young Ukrainian teenager who won many medals and was a championship swimmer and actually qualified for the Ukrainian Olympic team. And that has been some of the positive aspects of the Virgo major period. But in what way, both from the Parashari point of view and from the Jaimini point of view, is there the potential for vehicular accidents here?
Well, Mars itself typically can tend towards accidents, injuries.
And
That's
fourth lord aspected by Mars in Rahu Ketu axis. So first and the fourth lord both are aspected by Mars in Rahu Ketu axis, and Mars also aspecting the fourth house.
Right. So Jupiter rules both the Lagna, the body, and the fourth house vehicles. You see it afflicted here both by the Rahu Ketu axis and Mars. Mars afflicts both the Lagna and the fourth house. This, from the Parashari point of view, shows the potential for vehicular accidents resulting in bodily injury. Where do we see this from the Jaimini point of view?
GK-MK combination, mutual aspect GK-MK.
GK, right.
Correct. The MK represents vehicles and all fourth house significations in the Jaimini system. Jupiter's here, both the fourth lord and the MK. And again, it gets all the same afflictions, but now Mars as the GK. MK-GK combination. I had mentioned in the article that when other Jaimini Karakas get the influence of the GK, it should be considered and can be considered an affliction onto that Karaka and cause problems in whatever that Karaka represents. Now use Virgo as a dasha lagna. What happens to the fourth house from there?
Mars Ketu.
Do you see how this MK-GK combination gets activated? Two natural malefics in the fourth house, one of whom is a GK, in a mutual glance with Jupiter, who's actually the fourth lord from Virgo, who's also the MK. And the influence of Rahu here. Sad to say, a great tragedy occurred. He made the mistake of driving under the influence, caused a significant accident. He himself was injured, spent a week in the hospital, but the real tragedy is two of his friends that were with him died. And as a result, he's actually been sentenced to 8 years imprisonment for his culpability in this.
Oh, Mars is the 12th lord.
Lord.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mark, I was wondering if Venus.
A real sad case. Sorry, Sandeep, go ahead. What did you say?
The fact that Venus owns the house of friends and is Gandanta, so vehicles Venus, the fact that it's Gandanta.
Well, I've talked about this from the Jaimini point of view. It happened in the Virgo major period, but in the Parashari system with the Nakshatra dasha, the sub-period when this happens is quite clear. It happened in the Jupiter sub-period. And the sub-period was actually Rahu. So Jupiter as a sub-period and Rahu as a sub-period is very clear because it's activating this combination that can exactly bring this kind of event. The major period was the sun, which, specifically vehicular accidents causing bodily injuries, that would be difficult, if not impossible, to predict this based on the sun. Now, what you're pointing out is that Venus is both with the 11th Lord, but it's also the 6th Lord, right? 6th Lord with the sun, and then this moon. Is this moon a positive influence on the sun or what?
Yeah.
Why?
It's dark moon.
It's a very dark moon, extremely dark moon, almost completely Amavasya. And then who are all these planets Kendra bonded to in Leo?
Saturn within 4 degrees or 5 degrees.
The 6th house. But of course, when I showed this in the medical astrology class, you'd have to see D16 to understand further why the sun proved to be so unfortunate with regards to vehicles. You'll notice here it goes to the 12th in Mars's sign aspected by Mars. And Jupiter, the sub-period lord, when it happened, who's also the 4th lord of this chart, gets the aspect of Saturn from the 8th house. Rahu, the sub-period, gives the results of Mars and is aspected by Saturn.
6th lord Venus goes to the 9th house, Venus Karaka for vehicles.
No, I see that, but again, looking at, and it gets aspected by Mars. you have to see when the accident happened, what's getting activated in the dasha sequence. And those condition and position and overall disposition of those grahas in D16 to understand the sun is a major for giving this event.
I have a question. Can I ask?
Okay.
Yeah. So right now you told us that it happened, accident and everything happened. But if this chart comes in front of me, like I can also predict that there is something major going on with the health of the mother, like GK aspecting the MK. Also, the fourth lord Jupiter is also getting the aspect of GK, and moon is also not very bright. So it's Amavasya moon. So did this happen? The health of this, mother of,
Again, I'm sorry, but I just don't have any information about that. The information I give you in the case is the information I have.
But
Your logic about it making such assumption is not bad, and I can know one way in which the mother's been affected. Her son's going away to prison for 8 years.
That's true.
What else might be going on with her? I just don't know. All right. So now, coming to this chart. Why is there danger to the health in the Saturn-Jupiter period? By what principles of Jyotish could this be understood?
Saturn is aspecting the Lagna by the third in Parashari aspect.
Yeah, we're doing because we're doing the Vimshotri dasha, we're doing Parashari Jyotish.
6th, 8th relationship, just Saturn, Jupiter.
They are both Maraka planets.
No, hold on. There's no 6-8 relationship between Saturn and Jupiter. It's 5-9.
Oh, sorry.
So, Rohit, would you speak, please?
They are Maraka planets, Mark. Saturn is the second lord, and Jupiter, being placed in the 7th, becomes a Maraka. So they are both Maraka planets.
That's it. Especially Saturn here as a retrograde malefic, as the second lord, but then who also influences Saturn? Mars, right? And Jupiter here is actually the Lagna lord aspecting back on its own house, not retrograde, but of course is under the influence of the Rahu Ketu axis, and its position in the 7th house does make it a Maraka. So what happened to this person, also well known to me, a longtime friend, they suffered a mild stroke that left one side of their face kind of drooping and has created some balance issues. The good news is that they seem to be recovering, and there's hope that there will be a full recovery, but they did have a stroke. Now, in the Jaimini system, it occurred in the Pisces Cancer period. Why does Pisces as a major period hold some potential for bringing a health crisis like this?
But 6th lord in the first mark, sun being the Karaka of heart, and Cancer is 5th from the Pisces. So could that be?
No, the heart's not a problem. They had a stroke. It wasn't a heart thing. It was a.
AK goes to the 8th mark.
That's it. You're seeing it. So yeah, everyone should see that if you use Pisces as a dasha lagna, Saturn, it would use the AK, again, like under the first lord, goes to the 8th house and influenced by who? Karaka-wise.
GK.
GK is aspecting by Jaimini.
By the GK. So it's, again, just so everyone is clear and understands, obviously one of the main techniques for interpreting any sign period in the Jaimini system is to use that sign as a lagna, see the disposition of the planets from there, particularly where Karakas fall. From Pisces, AK, representing the body, goes to the 8th. It's in its exaltation sign, yes, but gets also the aspect of the GK.
Mark, also,
Mercury is the Karaka for strokes, right, Mark?
No, not necessarily. Not
Also,
necessarily.
additionally, the fact that the Pisces has decay could also be the Maraka itself.
Yes, in the Jaimini system, the decay functions as a Maraka. And so this is part of the story as well.
one thing also, Mark, I see is.
Hold on,
Sorry.
Pisces, of course, gets the influence of a lot of different graphs. Rahu Ketu, that's on the not positive side. Jupiter here's its aspect on it is actually something that would consider a saving grace. The moon here is it's waning. It's less than half bright. I wouldn't consider it to be a very positive thing. Now, before I let you comment, because I want to identify that the sub period when this happened was Cancer. Again, what strikes you about that is why this, stroke, this health crisis happened.
Eighth Lord.
By GK. And GK is 8th of Cancer.
Well, it's not so much that GK is 8th from Cancer, it's that Cancer gets the aspect of the GK. So both the Atmakaraka falling 8th from Pisces gets the aspect of the GK, and then the sub-period that precipitated the health crisis was, yes, it's the 8th sign of the birth chart, but it's also getting the aspect of the GK.
There's a 211 exchange, Mark. Does that help him at all?
Well, what could that 211 exchange be quite good for?
Monetary, his assets.
Now, she is in the Saturn period. It does create a good Dhan yoga, right? And even the Mars, mutual glance between Mars and Saturn here, which can be found for Sagittarius Lagna and Paul Newman, and made him quite a wealthy man. But
just want to make one point here, Mark, about the Saturn. I mean, it does not appeal to be as good as it looks. I understand it's exalted and everything.
It isn't, but tell me why.
It is retrograde. It has the aspect, it is the third lord also. So you have one Dusthana lord there, gets the aspect of Mars, which is another Dusthana lord, in exchange with another Dusthana lord, and also happens to be a lord of the 64th Navamsha.
Good, you're getting into a more subtle point, but that's an excellent point. And she just moved into this period. Remember, she's in Saturn. She's in her late 60s or maybe mid 60s. Saturn lasts for 19 years. What's likely to happen in the Saturn period? This will probably be a period that takes her, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly eligible to do so. It might not be until the very end of the period, but periods like
Saturn Mars,
Saturn Rahu, in even in the very last sub period, Saturn Jupiter. Of course, she's going to be in her late 70s, early 80s then, so it's not a tragedy. Usual longevity. Anybody recognize the name Sharon Tate?
Isn't that, she was murdered, wasn't she?
Yes, she was a Hollywood actress that was a victim of one of the Manson family murders, the notorious sort of horrendous crimes that took place in August of 1969 that created such a sensation. Stabbed to death. Now, from a Parashari point of view, first, what is not good about this chart from the standpoint of health? And
Ascendant is in 8th house. Mercury is in 8th house. From Prashari.
Lagna Lord goes to
Lagna, yeah, 8.
Okay, what else?
Hemmed by Malefic.
Hemmed by Malefic, Mars, and Ketu.
Right. So these planets in the 8th house, including the Lagna Lord, get hemmed. And notice the closeness in degrees between the Sun and Mercury. The Lagna Lord at 1041, the Sun at 11:1. in the hemming, Ketu on one side, Mars on the other. And then is there any additional malefic influence onto the Lagna?
Mars aspecting Lagna.
Of course, Mars as the sixth lord. And she was, by the way, stabbed to death. So this is a full-blown Arishta Yoga, right? Avi Yoga, as it's given in Paladipya, where the Lagna Lord goes to 6, 8, or 12 with additional malefic influence, and then there's additional malefic influence onto the Lagna itself. But now, in the interesting, or from a Jyotish point of view, the interesting thing about this case, you've got Jupiter here, right? In the Lagna, where of course it gets directional strength. But what?
The hemming is cancelled.
Retrograde.
Retrograde, yeah.
It's retrograde.
Mercury is also retrograde. You know, so.
It's retrograde, and it's also a mark of seventh lord. She actually died in a Jupiter sub-period. I mean, this horrific incident where she was murdered, being stabbed to death, actually happened in a Jupiter sub-period. No, sorry, in a Jupiter sub-period. The major
Jupiter's
period.
Maraka.
Yes, this is my point. An afflicted Maraka, afflicted by the sixth lord Mars. And then the major period was of the moon, and the sub-period was the sun. Again, what strikes you about that?
Sun is sitting with GK.
No, starting with the moon.
Okay, sorry.
Again, please, when we're doing Parashari, we're not invoking, we're doing planetary.
Okay, sorry.
Jaimini Karaka.
Moon, the Marka Lord in the Rahu Ketu axis in a mildly malefic third house. And the dispositor of Moon is in the 8th house.
Right. And within the sub-period of the sun, folks, moon, sun. And then from Chandra Lagna, see where these planets in Capricorn go.
6th house. 6th house, yeah.
The moon is a primary marker, second lord afflicted by the Rahu Ketu axis, and see the Kendra Sambandha to Saturn as the 8th lord. Kendra Sambandha of Saturn as the 8th lord. Some period of the sun, some period of Jupiter. Now, from the Jaimini point of view, it happened in the Pisces major period. Pisces major period. What's the affliction to Pisces here?
Mars.
Mars as Mars, right? And then the sub-period of Leo. Where does it fall from Pisces?
6th.
Now use Leo as an untar dasha lagna.
And then GK falls in the 6th from Leo.
But with who?
Atmakaraka and GK.
With Atmakaraka.
So do you see that does everyone see there's a primary Arishta Yoga here from both the Parashari and the Jaimini point of view? We already talked it from the Parashari point of view. From the Jaimini point of view, it's because the AK goes into the 8th with the GK, and who additionally influences this AK?
Saturn from Taurus.
And who else?
Rahu.
Yes.
Rahu, moon.
Rahu,
Does,
yeah.
Does everybody see by Rashi Drishti that the AK in the 8th with the GK is aspected by both Saturn and Rahu? So, this is the kind of picture that can sometimes show up when it's a person's unfortunate karma to have such an experience. Sorry, I know this webinar is a complete downer because we're talking about, these horrific sort of things that have happened, but they're a part of life too, and they have their astrological side.
I had a question mark about the Jupiter being retrograde. Like, I've noticed in a few charts that Jupiter retrograde in the 7th house, the person may, other factors obviously out there, they'll not find, or they'll have multiple dates before they find their sort of soulmate. I was wondering, wherever it's indicated with Jupiter, and unexpected, like with the murder, was it the person was maybe felt they were in a safe environment and that's where they got murdered? Is that a possible indication with Jupiter retrograde?
They were in their home. I'm sure they thought that was a safe environment, but didn't turn out to be the case. And my simple answer to your question, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. All I know is that this is a chart of someone who was murdered in their moon, sun, Jupiter period. So now, again, what's just from a standpoint of making a health assessment of the chart in general, what's on the plus side of the ledger, what's on the not so plus side?
Venus is there.
Venus.
That is the plus sign with Mercury, one more penny.
Venus is the Lagna Lord in the Lagna.
In its mood trikona.
Yeah, but
it's also the 8th Lord at the same time.
It's also the 8th Lord, but where, look at Venus's degrees, where does it go in the Rosh? Goes into Aries, doesn't go into the rotation sign. But is there any, well, how would you consider Mercury's influence, and how then would you consider Saturn's influence?
Mercury would behave like a malefic, so it would be two malefics with Venus.
Saturn here is a...
Hold on, would it behave like a pure malefic here? It's also with Venus in its own sign. Isn't it mixed?
Because it's the 12th Lord, I feel like it might have a slightly more malefic.
But it's also the 9th Lord, rules the best trine.
Okay.
That's a Raju.
First lordship would make it an impressionable, which means it will give the result of the 9th lord, and Saturn being the Yoga Karaka. But is this the chart of Chris Evert, Mark?
No, but you're someone born, well, you're recognizing a lot of the same features. So good for you, but no, it's not.
Okay.
What is the affliction to the Lagna Lord here?
Saturn.
Saturn. And I'm showing this chart purposely because, again, people get enamored with Saturn for Libra because it's the Yoga Karaka planet, and when it's in the Lagna, it's in its exaltation sign, and it may be performing powerful yogas as it does here, and it may give those yoga results, but make no mistake, this is the influence of a natural malefic on both the Lagna Lord.
It's good for knowledge gained and intelligence, but it's not good for health, I think.
Well, it's a net influence of a natural malefic onto the Lagna Lord. Plain and simple. Now, what feature in here in the chart can be good for overcoming and having resistance to disease, successfully fighting disease?
Exalted benefic Jupiter.
All the benefics and Kendras.
Rahu, Mars in the 3rd.
8th Lord Venus getting exalted or in mool trikona sign.
Well, we have a lot of opinions about this. Listen to what Rohit said. Natural malefics in the Trishadai, 3, 6, and 11, are can make one able to resist disease, fight disease successfully. Now, benefics and kendras can be protective of the health, and that is also true here. You've got all the benefics in kendras, all of them having a source of strength. On the one hand, though, this Jupiter here, how do we think about this Jupiter here?
It's the Gnati Karaka.
Well, it is, but we're doing Prasha right now. I'm sorry if I'm confusing people. When we think about Jupiter here for Libra in the Prasha system, what do we also have to understand?
It's a functional malefic.
It's the rule of 3 and 6.
Exalted 6th Lord.
It's an exalted 6th Lord, but it's the 6th Lord. And does it have any malefic influence?
Mars and Saturn.
It's also the depositor of Mars Rahu, so not only aspected, there's a strong.
Don't get too enamored, folks. This exalted Jupiter is actually exalted by Gautama. It's the 6th Lord of this chart. It's aspected by Mars, who's in double Maraka. It's also afflicted by Saturn. Now, she happened to run Jupiter major period in Vimshotri simultaneously running the Cancer major period in Chara. Therefore, what might you think about this?
Cancer and GK.
DK got activated from both, like from Vimshottani, 6th house got activated, and from Jaimini,
and so what do you conclude?
Health issues.
Health issues. She had cancer. I don't know if she means type 4 or stage 4 sarcoma that resulted in 2 operations. It's stage 4 sarcoma, and she survived, which she has. She beat the odds. And you can see in Vimshottari, it was Jupiter, Saturn afflicting the 6th Lord Jupiter, Saturn also afflicting the Lagna Lord. And in Vimshottari, it was the major period of cancer that I've already said. Now, the good thing here is that, Jupiter here is not got additional affliction, right? There's no actual Graha Drishti aspects from, would be from Aquarius, Scorpio, or Taurus. I'm not sure the sub-period, but I believe the sub-period was Taurus, which, I'm fairly certain, although I'm going to double check this. Why would the sub-period of Taurus within the major period of Cancer be a particularly problematic one?
It's the first 8th house, and then again
GK aspects. Yeah.
All
GK
the
aspect again. What else? One other major reason.
Atma Karaka goes to the market, not the market, the 8th house or 6th house.
6th house. You're seeing it. Using Taurus as an Antardashi Lagna, Atma Karaka Venus goes to the 6th house from there with affliction, and also the DK here playing the role of Maraka. But the good news is that she survived, and this happened some time ago. So the longer you go without a reoccurrence, obviously the better your odds are that you're not going to have a reoccurrence. So this is
Mark,
a positive outcome on this one. Yeah.
Mark, would you attribute the fact that she's come out of it is because of exalted Jupiter aspecting Taurus? It's the GK as well, but it possibly
and this is the thing. Such planets can have a dual effect.
Yeah.
Meaning, as an exalted natural benefic, it can have a positive influence. As a GK, it it can be part of the problem.
This is exactly what Dr. Charak also said in his book, Mark. He said that from a static point of view, this exaltation of Jupiter in the Kendra protects the native. But but when you run the period of that Jupiter, then it's problematic because it's the 6th Lord and it's also the 3rd Lord.
That's exactly right. And of course, when she runs Cancer, it's the GK.
Yeah, correct.
So also sometimes I notice that like if it's not retrograde, maybe is the case here why it did end up positive, the outcome, but the associations by house, Gnati Karaka guaranteed that it was going to happen as well, but also guaranteed some protection in the end.
Yes, I would say so.
Also, Venus is AK and it's in Mool Trikona sign. It might have helped.
Well, the fact that, Venus is the Lagna or in the Lagna, it's also the AK, is strong in its own sign. It has some additional benefic influence, is a helpful thing, but, it's also with Saturn there. So the last chart I want to discuss before I look at some questions that were sent to me that I said I would respond to. In the article, I talked about how when the GK is influencing other karakas, it should be considered to be, can be an affliction to that particular karaka. So, we've talked about the moon, the MK being representative vehicles, but of course, what would be another primary indicator of the MK? In terms of a person, in your life.
Mother.
And of course, in terms of stira karakas, fixed karakas, which graha represents mother?
Moon.
Moon.
Moon. So come to this Pisces period. Obviously, it contains the moon. And from the Jaimini point of view, we're doing Jaimini now. It's the aspect of Saturn and also the GK. And there's a combination of the MK with the GK that's also in the fourth house from there. Fortunately, there's also Jupiter, though of course Jupiter here is also a retrograde, right? But see the exchange between Mercury and Jupiter. Do you see that? This person shared with me that they went through a period where her mother actually tried to commit suicide 3 times. Very sad situation. All 3 times this person was actually able to save her mother. And she notes here that the 3rd time was nearly a miracle as her mother had consumed over 100 sleeping pills. So both from a static potential point of view in this chart. So what are the influences on the 4th house, 4th lord here? From the Parashari point of view, 4th house, 4th lord from the Parashari point of view.
Mars, both aspecting the 4th house and 4th lord.
Mars
and
is in the 4th house.
Okay.
It aspects the 4th lord, and Venus is the 4th lord under the influence of the Rahu Ketu axis. Right? The moon here, from a Parashari point of view, is actually the Lagna lord in the 9th. We really, unless you take Kendra Sambandha, which I do, there's the influence of Saturn here. It's also involved in a Kesari yoga and stuff, which may be why it never really succeeded. But it's an example of what I was talking about in the article, which is why I'm showing this, because it was sent to me by someone who had read the article, of how, again, before we saw the GK-MK combination be a difficult, challenging one, problematic one for vehicle accidents. Here, it's, obviously a combination that's not good for mother. Right? All right, so to close out this session here, some student sent me these questions in one of my input. First one here, does a GK in a good dignity decrease the seriousness of the illness issues, negative effects during the char dasha of the sign containing it? Or is it better to have a GK in a bad dignity? Remember, this is exactly the case here, right? And my answer to this is that it's not black and white, one way or the other. You can't say that a GK in a good dignity is better than one that's not, because it all depends on what other additional factors are coming into play. I could show you a GK who's Jupiter in its own sign Sagittarius. Well, in fact, let me bring up a chart here that to show you this. My point is that it all depends on what else is going on and the context of the chart of the whole. So this is a 7-year-old man, a chart of a 7-year-old man, early 70s, who died from COVID, complications due to COVID, after a diagnosis of cancer in their Rahu-Saturn period. And it should be rather clear why Rahu-Saturn could bring both illness and also their death. But in the Jaimini system, it happened in the major period of Virgo.
Hey, Mark, we are still seeing the Word document.
You are? Huh. My apologies. Tell me if the chart comes up.
Yes, now we can see it. Thanks.
All right, so when I was saying this person, died, they'd been diagnosed with cancer, a treatable form of cancer, but then in the hospital they contracted COVID and they died. And this was in the Rahu-Saturn period and sub-period, which, I can leave it to you to see how that was predictable on that basis. But in the Jaimini system, it was the major period of Virgo. Now you can see that 2 Jaimini grahas, 2 planets influence Virgo, Moon as the MK, but then Jupiter as the GK, Jupiter in its own sign. Strong in that sense. But you'll see that from Virgo, the AK sun goes to the 6th with the Marika DK Mercury getting the influences of the 2 malefics over from Cancer by Rashi Drishti. The sub-period when the person passed was the sub-period of Gemini, also getting the aspect of the GK. So, if running the Virgo period, the AK is configured differently here from that dasha lagna, and they're getting the aspect of this GK, who, by the way, is also the 6th lord. That's a different context, right, than what we saw sort of previously. So I can't tell you, black and white that, oh yes, a well-dignified GK is going to be less harmful than a poorly dignified GK, because the fact is that it all depends.
I think the malefics on the ascendant really, it's just what I feel. Maybe that is
That's
predominant.
part of the context. That's exactly right. That's part of the context.
And also, Mark, I think in the Gemini, like you've always taught us that the GK is a GK, right? So there is going to be the intensity of the results may differ, but the GK is a GK, like a natural malefic is a natural malefic.
That's true, but he was saying, is there a qualitative difference as to what negative effect they'll produce? Which is a legitimate question. I can understand the question. I'm just saying that you can't just go by that, because there's other factors come into play. So next question here, does a natural benefic, and this applies to what we just saw, for example, Jupiter, which is a GK, produce less serious health issues? And my answer is not in my experience. The natural malefic as a GK can produce just as bad of a health issue as a natural malefic as a GK in my experience. But again, it depends upon what else is going on as to why that would be the case. So it says here, when the GK is in a Rashi that has a strong Raja Yoga, say for example, AK, AMK combination, does it produce less serious health concerns? Not necessarily, because again, AK, GK combination is like the combination of the 1st lord and the 6th lord. Now, such a combination as AK, AMK with the GK, as in the case of somebody like Serena Williams, can also mean that they're being very successful when you run that period in sports competitions, or for a politician. But with a sports person, it could also mean injuries during that time, which I've seen it do. Second to last question here, does Chara Dasha of a sign in a Dushtana house produce more serious health concerns if the GK is in it, as opposed to Chara Dashas of sign in Kendra? The answer is absolutely yes in this case. Does Chara Dasha of a sign containing GK produce more serious health concerns and adverse issues compared to a Chara Dasha of a sign that receives the aspect of the GK? No, in my experience, both the occupation of sign by the GK and the aspect can give the effect of creating health issues. But again, it's just by itself, not as much as if there's other things that then support that would be the case, which is what I've usually seen in the case of it producing a serious concern. And we saw examples of this here. It's not just the fact that the GK is in a sign or aspect in a sign, it's what's going on additionally with all that, right? We'll say our Sanskrit prayer and end for today. Asatoma sadgamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya mitriuma mitam gamaya sarvesham swasti bhavatu sarvesham shanti bhavatu sarvesham purnam bhavatu sarvesham mangalam bhavatu loka samasta sukhino bhavantu om shanti 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 hari om tat sat. Thank you everyone for your lively participation, I would say. And so until we all meet again, I wish you well, keep well. Namaste.